All right, take a quick look at your hands. Just really look at them for a second. Now picture yourself getting dropped right into the middle of the brutal African savanna, say 2 million years ago. You don't have claws, you're completely lacking fur, your teeth, they're basically flat, entirely useless for tearing through raw hide. And let's be real, you're definitely not wrestling a saber-toothed cat anytime soon. If we're being totally honest here, physically speaking, humans are kind of pathetic. We are essentially just slow-moving meat snacks. So how on earth did this hairless, highly vulnerable ape actually manage to become the apex predator of the entire planet? Well, let's dive into this explainer and uncover what is honestly a profound mystery. It's the ultimate survival question, right? Now, the standard story you've probably heard your whole life is that we were just smarter. We invented tools, we threw spears, and through sheer intellect alone, we completely conquered the food chain. But, spoiler alert, that's a total myth. The truth is actually far stranger and honestly, deeply humbling. We didn't conquer the animal kingdom all by ourselves. Not even close. We actually survived by hijacking the evolutionary traits of the animals around us. We all know that classic museum diorama stereotype. You know the one. The noble, upright hunter standing proudly over a fresh kill. But the reality? We were bottom feeders. Way back in the early Pleistocene epoch, the African forests were drying out, turning into these wide-open grasslands. And our ancestors? They were small, totally exposed, and sharing a neighborhood with absolutely massive predators. We weren't hunting, we were waiting. We actually survived by scavenging the leftovers abandoned by those giant savanna predators. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually know this happened? Well, archaeologists at the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania didn't just take a wild guess. They found microscopic forensic evidence. Using electron microscopes, they looked at ancient bones and found these jagged big cat teeth marks. But here's the crazy part. Directly on top of those teeth marks were V-shaped grooves made by stone tools. So picture this. The predator makes the kill, totally gorges itself, abandons the carcass, and then our ancestors scurry out, grab the bones, drag them away, and smash them wide open with rocks. So why go through all the trouble of smashing bones? Well, it comes down to a massive biological trade-off. By the time the lions and hyenas were done with the carcass, there was literally no meat left. But hidden inside those bones was the marrow, pure, calorie-dense fat. And human brains, they are massive energy hogs. I mean, right now, your brain is only about 2% of your total body weight, but it's burning a staggering 20% of your daily calories. Cracking those bones from marrow gave us the massive energy required to fuel our expanding brains, and it also allowed our digestive tracts to shrink down because we were no longer forced to digest tough, fibrous plants all day long. The absolute game changer here is that consuming all this pure animal fat didn't just keep us from starving to death, it literally mutated our biology. Over the next million years, thanks to this incredibly dense energy source, the human brain doubled in volume, literally 2 times the size. Think about that. We quite literally could not have grown the very brains that make us human without the fat provided by the kills of other animals. And as our brains grew, our populations expanded, and we finally began to migrate out of Africa. But, that led to a totally new, deadly, freezing problem. Section 2, the Bone Age, surviving the ice. Moving up into Europe and Asia meant facing the brutal reality of the Ice Age. Because let's face it, if the temperature drops to negative 20 degrees, having the biggest brain on Earth isn't going to save a tropical ape from hypothermia. We always hear this era called the Stone Age, right? But humanity's expansion across the globe was actually built on bone. To avoid freezing to death, we had to flat out steal the evolutionary adaptations of other animals. They provided our structural materials. We used antlers to flake our flint, we used sinew for our bowstrings, and crucially, we used bone for a piece of tech that changed absolutely everything. Just think about this unbelievable piece of evidence from 50,000 years ago. Over in Siberia's Denisova cave, archaeologists dug up a needle carved entirely from a bird bone. It even has a precision-drilled eyelet. And when scientists put it under a microscope, they found wear and tear on the sides from being pushed through thick animal hides thousands and thousands of times. So this wasn't just some crude spike. This was a highly precise tailoring tool. And that single tool, it allowed humans to completely hijack animal evolution. Instead of waiting around for a million years to naturally evolve thick fur like, say, a woolly mammoth, we just killed a mammoth and borrowed its fur. We sewed these airtight, multi-layered, waterproof boots, incredibly insulated parkas, and tailored pants. This stolen survival kit is what enabled our ancestors to cross the absolutely freezing Siberian tundra and make it over the Bering Land Bridge. Our conquest of the globe was literally stitched together by animal bone and animal skin.
We ate them to grow our brains, and then we wore them to survive the cold.
Next up, the Wolf Alliance.
Okay, flash forward to somewhere between 15 and 30,000 years ago. Less aggressive wolves started scavenging around our campfires, and over generations, they slowly became dogs. But how do we know for sure this was a real, true partnership, and not just us holding them captive? Well, the smoking gun is the 14,000-year-old Bonn Oberkassel burial over in Germany. Forensic analysis on the dog in this grave showed it actually survived a really severe bout of canine distemper when it was just a puppy. In the wild, without intensive, round-the-clock care, like being cleaned and hand-fed by humans, a wolf pup dies from distemper in a matter of days. But this one, it lived for months. You don't spend that kind of precious time and energy nursing a tool. You do that for a partner.
And man, that partnership paid off with massive compound interest, 50%. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies have found that having hunting dogs increases a hunter's success rate by up to 50%. Now put that into perspective. When missing even a single meal could mean starvation for your kids, a 50% boost in your efficiency isn't just a nice bonus. It is the literal difference between life and death.
Basically, together, we became a superorganism. We took our ranged weapons and our big intellects, and we combined them with the dog's vastly superior hearing and just unmatched sense of smell. I mean, they could smell a single drop of blood from miles away. They could hear a tiny twig snap in the pitch dark, warning us of ambush predators. We provided the deadly tools, and they provided the ultimate sensory radar.
Which brings us to the apocalyptic apex predator.
Now, as much as we all love to romanticize the idea of early humans living in perfect, harmonious balance with nature, the science tells a much darker story. As our tools got better and our partnerships with dogs grew stronger, we went from being those bottom-feeding scavengers to terrifyingly efficient apex predators. When humans finally pushed out of Africa and arrived in new places like North America and Australia, those continents were absolutely teeming with megafauna. We're talking mammoths, giant sloths the size of cars, massive short-faced bears, wombats as big as a rhinoceros. But within just a few thousand years of our arrival, almost all of them were wiped out, completely extinct, hunted to the absolute brink, or driven out by our use of fire. Sadly, the very animals that taught us how to survive ended up being the very first victims of our lethal efficiency. But you know, the animal kingdom ultimately had its revenge, and it reshaped our biology all over again. Around 10,000 years ago, during the agricultural revolution, we started domesticating livestock and living practically shoulder to shoulder with them. And this introduced a phenomenon called zoonosis. That's simply when a disease jumps from an animal host directly into a human. Just take a look at where some of our worst diseases actually come from. Living in these tight, completely unventilated early settlements meant we were constantly sharing pathogens with our herds. Measles, that originally mutated from a virus found in cattle. Influenza, that came straight from ducks and pigs. Millions of early humans died from these horrific animal-borne plagues that just swept like wildfire through our newly formed settlements. But here is the crazy biological twist. Surviving those catastrophic plagues fundamentally reshaped our white blood cells. Our modern immune system was literally forged in the fire of these animal pathogens. And this is exactly what gave European explorers that massive herd immunity that later tragically devastated indigenous populations in the Americas simply because they hadn't lived alongside those specific domesticated animals. So quite literally, the very shape of our immune system is a direct reflection of the livestock our ancestors lived with. Our final section, our animal mosaic. So let's look back one more time at that helpless, hairless ape standing out on the savannah. We only survived because we cracked the bones of the dead to grow our brains. We literally stole the skin off reindeer to survive the freezing ice. We borrowed the nose of the wolf to conquer the dark. And we absorbed the deadly diseases of our livestock to build an ironclad immune system. Every single advantage we have today was stolen, borrowed, or adapted. We are a mosaic of the animal kingdom. And that leads me to this final, somewhat provocative thought. Today, we've insulated ourselves so deeply from the wild that we tend to view animals just as resources or entertainment. We completely forget that they were our very first teachers and protectors. So I've got to ask you, if the wild vanished tomorrow, how long do you honestly think our advanced civilization would actually last without it? Let me know your survival timeline down in the comments. I am genuinely curious who thinks we'd even make it past a single year. If this explainer made you look at your dog or even yourself just a little bit differently, please make sure to subscribe for more of these structured, visual deep dives into the mysteries of our world. Until next time, stay curious.